So picture this. You've lived in your house for 30 years. You know every crack in the wall, every squeaky floorboard, every shortcut through the backyard. Your grandmother lived there before you. Her grandmother before her. Then one day, a stranger walks through your front door uninvited, looks around, pulls out a notebook and writes, "I have discovered this house." And the crazy part? The world believes him. That's not a metaphor. That's basically what happened over and over and over again across an entire continent. And today we're going to talk about it. Because the story of how Europe discovered Africa is one of the most audacious rewrites in human history. And somebody needed to say it out loud. Today's chapter is called Named, Claimed, Erased, and if that title already has you feeling something good, hold on to that feeling. It's going to make a lot more sense in about 8 minutes. Here's what we're covering. We're going to walk through multiple cases, real explorers, real rivers, real mountains, real kingdoms where European men arrived somewhere, saw people already living there, and still had the nerve to write "discovered" in their journals. We're going to talk about Mungo Park in the River Niger, David Livingstone and Victoria Falls, and a few others that don't get mentioned enough. But here's where it gets interesting, and I promise you, it does get interesting. We're not just going to say, that was wrong. We're going to talk about why it was done, how it worked, and why it still matters today. Because this isn't ancient history. This is the story of who gets to name the world. Let's get into it. Before we get to the specific cases, you need to understand the logic behind all of this. Because when you hear what these explorers actually said and wrote, your first instinct might be surely they knew people were already there. Yes, they knew. They absolutely knew. Here's the thing. European exploration in Africa wasn't operating in a vacuum. It was operating inside a very specific idea, an idea so convenient it might as well have been designed by a committee of people who stood to benefit from it. The idea was this: if a European hasn't documented it, it doesn't count. African knowledge, centuries of it, oral traditions, trade routes, maps drawn in different languages, entire kingdoms with their own historians and geographers, none of that counted as real knowledge by European standards. It wasn't written in Latin. It wasn't filed in a London archive. So as far as the European intellectual world was concerned, it simply didn't exist. It's like saying a tree didn't fall in the forest because you weren't there to hear it. And here's the part that should make you laugh, except it's too infuriating to laugh at. Many of these explorers didn't even find these places on their own. They were guided there by Africans. The very people they were about to write out of the story showed them where to go. Let that sit for a second. Your guide takes you to a river his people have fished for 1,000 years. You write his name nowhere. You write your own name everywhere. And then the world names the river after you. But here's where it gets really crazy, and I mean really crazy. The actual history of these so-called discoveries is hiding in plain sight. Let me show you. Case 1. Mungo Park in the River Niger. 1796. A young Scottish doctor named Mungo Park sets out from the Gambia River heading east. His mission, funded by the African Association in London, was to find the Niger River and determine which direction it flows. Now, stop right there. The Niger River is roughly 4,200 kilometers long. It passes through what is today Guinea, Mali, Niger, Benin, and Nigeria. The Mandinka people, the Songhai Empire, the people of Jen, the traders of Timbuktu, they had been living on, fishing from, trading along, and navigating that river for centuries. The city of Timbuktu, one of the most sophisticated intellectual centers in the medieval world, sat near its banks. Scholars there were writing books while Europe was still figuring things out. The Niger wasn't hidden. It wasn't unknown. It was one of the most important trade arteries in West Africa. But Mungo Park wrote in his journal, upon seeing it, that he felt the joy of a man beholding a great prize for the first time. He went back to London. He wrote a book, Travels in the Interior Districts of Africa. It became a bestseller. He became famous. And the river that Africans had named, used, sung about, and built civilizations around got credited in Western history to a Scottish doctor who followed local guides to get there. Case 2. David Livingstone and Victoria Falls. Fast forward to 1855. David Livingstone, Scottish missionary, national hero in Britain, arrives at a massive waterfall on the Zambezi River in southern Africa. The local Tonga and Lozi people called it Mosioetunya, which means, beautifully and directly, the smoke that thunders. They had called it that for generations. Because, and here's a wild idea, when you live next to the largest waterfall in the world, you tend to notice it. You tend to give it a name. You tend to build your entire understanding of the landscape around it. Livingstone looked at it, pulled out his notebook, and named it Victoria Falls, after Queen Victoria, who had never been to Africa, who would never go to Africa. He later wrote that he was the first European to behold it. Not the first person. The first European. That qualifier is doing so much work in that sentence. That one word European is a whole philosophy packed into 8 letters. It's saying, the Tonga people's relationship with this waterfall doesn't count as beholding it in any way that matters. Today the waterfall has 2 official names. Victoria Falls and Mosioetunya. It took over a century for the original name to get back on the map. Case 3, the Mountains of the Moon. Here's one most people don't know, and this one might be the most revealing of all. The Rwenzori Mountains. Sitting on the border between present-day Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Snow-capped peaks rising over 5,000 meters. Among the highest mountains in Africa. The Greek geographer Ptolemy, writing in the 2nd century AD, referred to a range of mountains in Central Africa, the source of the Nile, as the Mountains of the Moon. He got that information from African and Arab traders who had been moving through the region long before any European set foot there. Fast forward to 1888. Henry Morton Stanley, the same man famous for Dr. Livingstone, I presume, sees the Rwenzori Range and reports it as a new discovery. Never mind that the people of the region had lived in and around those mountains for generations. Never mind that the mountains appear in ancient accounts sourced from African knowledge. Never mind that local guides again were the ones who helped Stanley navigate. In the Western historical record, Stanley found them. The pattern is so consistent it almost becomes darkly comedic. Show up. Write it down. Ignore everyone who was already there. Go home to applause. Case 4, the Dark Continent. Framing, and here's the thing that ties all of these cases together, the framing that made all of it possible. Europe called Africa the Dark Continent. Now, Africa at the time of early European exploration was home to the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Kingdom of Congo, Great Zimbabwe, the Swahili coast city-states, Aksum, Benin civilizations with advanced trade, architecture, literature, governance, and mathematics. The darkness wasn't Africa's. It was Europe's ignorance about Africa. But once you call something dark, once you frame an entire continent as unknown, primitive, waiting to be illuminated, you give yourself permission to be the one who brings the light. And then everything that was already there gets written over. Now here's the part where someone in the comments will say, "Why are you still talking about the past?" It's over. Move on. And look, I get it. I understand the impulse. But here's why it's not just the past. When you erase a people from the history of their own geography, when you take their rivers, their mountains, their cities, and attach someone else's name to them, you do something deeper than rename a landmark. You rewrite who has the authority to know things. You create a world where African knowledge doesn't count as knowledge until a European validates it. And that idea didn't stay in the 1800s. It traveled. It got into textbooks. It got into school curriculums across the continent. It got into the way entire generations were taught to see themselves. Children in African schools were taught the history of their own rivers through the eyes of the people who discovered them. That's not a small thing. That's a profound psychological operation. And here's the breadcrumb I want to leave you with, because we're going to go deeper on this in a future chapter. The erasure wasn't just geographic. It wasn't just rivers and waterfalls. It happened in medicine, mathematics, architecture, astronomy. The same logic, it doesn't count until we say so, was applied across every field. But that's a story for another day. And trust me, you want to be there for that one. So let's bring it back to where we started. The stranger walking into your house and calling it a discovery. The reason that works, the reason the world believed it wasn't stupidity. It wasn't just arrogance. It was a system. A system of documentation, validation, and publication that only recognized certain kinds of knowledge from certain kinds of people. Mungo Park had a publisher. The Mandinka fishermen on the Niger had generations of lived knowledge. Guess which one got into the history books? David Livingstone had the ear of the British Empire. The Tonga people had Mosioetunya, a name that sounded like the thunder it described. Guess which name appeared on the maps? Henry Morton Stanley had a newspaper backing him. The people of the Rwenzori had been home for centuries. Guess who got the credit? Named, claimed, erased. But here's the thing about erasure, it's never total. The name survived. The knowledge survived. The people survived. And now we're here telling the story the other way around. If this chapter hit different, if it made you curious or mad or both, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Tell me which discovery bothered you the most. And if you're new here, welcome. This is what we do. We go back, we look closely, and we tell the story that got left out. I'll see you in the next one.